And they, as well as a couple others, will be offering some testimony over the next couple of hours on the trails bills that we've been looking at for a little while now. And we're listing it under H467. The committee probably remembers that was the bill that sort of pulled several different elements from other bills into one bill, but it's also a bill without a short form bill without any actual language other than the introductory language. So it's an opportunity for us just to get a better understanding of the landscape out there. Hear a little bit from Nick the other day with the council. But this morning, we're going to start out with Cindy. Are you prepared to go first before I announce that you're going to go first?
I would be happy to go first, Chair Durfee.
Okay, so Cindy Locke, who is representing VAST. And I think did we hear from you earlier in the session?
Yes.
Maybe, yeah.
Yes, I came in with Nick the first time that he met with you all.
Got it. Okay, great. Well, do you have a presentation that we're going to be looking at, or do you just want to chat?
I just want to chat.
Okay, well, go right ahead.
Okay, so for the record, I'm Cindy Locke. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont Association of Snow Travelers, better known as VAST. And on your agenda, it says I'm the Executive Director of the Trails and Greenways Council. Actually, we don't have an Executive Director of the Trails and Greenways Council. That's one of the reasons we're here. But I am the treasurer. I am an officer of the Trails and Greenways Council. So I thought I would, since you have heard from us before in general about the Trails and Greenways Council, we appreciate you inviting us back to hear about maybe us individually, and then collectively why the Trails and Greenways Council is important to us. So thank you again for your time. I had no idea we had to fill 2 hours, and I'm sure that's not really your expectation either, but but I can talk forever in a day. So a little bit about me. I've been the Executive Director of VAST for 9 years now. My background is association management, and that's why I was hired. I've worked for 3 different chambers of commerce in Vermont over 25 years. I started at the Stowe Area Association. I worked at the Lake Champlain Regional Chamber of Commerce, and I was the Executive Director of the Lamoille Region Chamber of Commerce. So that's primarily why I was hired. I was not a snowmobiler when I started at VAST, but being one of the largest associations in Vermont, and certainly the largest, maybe the Green Mountain Club is larger than us as far as membership goes, but let me talk to you a little bit about VAST, not so much about me. So we range from 23,000 to 25,000 members a year. We have a budget of about $4 million. The majority of our money goes into grooming. We spend anywhere from $1.3 to $2 million a year grooming our trail system. We have 4,100 miles of trails in Vermont. We have more than 9,500 landowners. And 80% of our landowners are private landowners. And so you can appreciate that being one of your jobs being agriculture, that we've got a lot of farmers that allow us to use their lands. And the other 20% of our lands are federal and state lands. They host us. So we have lots of landowner permission forms. We have contracts with state and feds, and we operate a little bit differently than other snowmobile organizations. Most snowmobile organizations in the United States or even Canada are run by state government. There's only one other state in the United States that operates like VAST does, with a nonprofit. So we're almost like a quasi-state agency ourselves. We work very closely with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation, ACCD, and we have very strict policies and procedures on how we build trails and maintain them. Let me back up a little bit. So we started in the 1970s. We actually approached the state of Vermont about becoming more regulated, so we could organize better. So there's a lot of state statutes that protect VAST, but also regulate VAST. And that was the beginning of our partnership with the state. and how we are today. So we have talk about our grooming fleet, because this is a big question we get, is what type of groomers we use. If you haven't seen them, they're very similar to what the ski areas use. So they range in price from $255,000 to $350,000 each. And we have 104 in our fleet. And these are all run by volunteers. We have 6 full-time staff at the VAST office. We operate year-round. It's not just a winter job. It's a very active job to have. And we, our volunteers, not only groom our trails, and we give equipment grants for the equipment, and we pay them per mile, but they're all volunteers. And so they're putting up our trail signs in the fall, and they're taking them down in the summer. And with 4,100 miles of trail, you can imagine that's like building an interstate road system every year, although it's through the woods and it's beautiful, and our signs aren't big and permanent like road signs are, but they are regulatory signs. So we have stop ahead, stop signs, junction signs, bridge ahead, hazard signs, corner signs, all those things that have to go up in the fall and come down in the spring. And as I mentioned before, we have landowner permissions. And so that's a very important part of what we do, is collect these permissions in writing and verbally. Sometimes it's an annual permission form. Sometimes it could be that the landowner is fine with us being on there as long as they own the property, but they have to sign a form or give us that agreement. We also we have some easements, a small amount of easements. We've also worked with groups like the Vermont Land Trust and joined in with other easements. And we also share our trails with other organizations, other trail organizations like Catamount, Green Mountain Club, Kingdom Trails, Vermont Mountain Bike Association, et cetera. So I'm going to stop there with VAST and move on to why we think the Trails and Greenways Council is important. But I would like, if there are any questions about VAST, I'm happy to answer them.
You mentioned your budget, $4 million, Cindy, an annual budget. Can you tell us about the source, where the revenue comes from?
Sure. So the majority of our revenue comes from our trail passes. So in order to ride a snowmobile in the state of Vermont, you have to have a registered snowmobile. You have to have liability insurance, and you have to buy a trail pass from VAST. And so we sell trail passes. We have a 3-day pass and an annual pass. So the majority of our revenue comes from that stream. That's about 3.5 million. And the other 500,000 comes from, we get a percentage of the gas tax. We share, there's a percent that we share with FPR, Forest Parks and Recreation, and with VASA, the ATV Association. And then we also get all the registration money for every snowmobile that's registered in the state of Vermont. That money comes back to VAST. And that money is in statute. And that is for law enforcement and safety, equipment grants. But there's a portion, $5 from every registration has to go to law enforcement. So we use that money. We actually hire all of our law enforcement. So we hire Vermont State Police, Vermont Fish and Wildlife Wardens, Sheriff's Association, and agencies, and some police departments to police our trails.
All right, I'm not seeing, one question, Representative O'Brien.
Cindy, I'm on the select board in Tunbridge, Vermont, which is, we're dealing with this huge legal trails issue now. And it's nice to have VAST as far as an exemplary relationship between an association and private landowners. I'm wondering, a couple questions. Who is allowed to use VAST trails? Like, there's some ambiguity on this, I think, as far as can cross-country skiers use them, pedestrians, and then, like, during the summer, are they still VAST trails? Like, if a horse equestrian group wants to go on a VAST trail in summer, you know, what jurisdiction does VAST have, or what permission might you need?
Those are two great questions. So our trails only exist in the wintertime. So even though the footprint of the trail is there, it only is a winter trail. And then as far as allowable use, it's up to the landowner. So if it's a municipality or state land, they generally let anyone. Or some private landowners, the majority of our private landowners are not snowmobilers. They're cross-country skiers. They're someone who wants a nice groomed trail on their property. And so our clubs will recognize that when they are getting their landowner permission form signed. And we actually offer signs that have pictures of cross-country skiers or pictures of horses or respect the landowner. So snowmobilers know, because they're not always going to know when they switch a property boundary, right? So they'll know that if they see those signs, okay, I better slow down because it looks like there might be some cross-country skiers also using this trail. So when it's not organized, like when we share with Kingdom Trails, it's organized, like they're putting up signs, we're putting up signs. And so riders, whether they're riding a bike or they're riding a snowmobile, know that each other's, these are organized trails. But when it's a private land, generally these signs really help our riders know what's coming up ahead of them. And we have some, I'll just add this. We do, since the pandemic, of course, trail usage has really gone up, and especially for ours is really maintained, but especially for like mountain biking, cross-country skiing and snowshoeing and things like that. So we do have a lot of owners that are okay with other people using their trails, but what they really ask is keep your dog on a leash. You're on their property, and it's really important to respect that you're on private property. But if someone does plan to cross-country ski on someone's property, it's not clearly defined if it's allowed. Check with the landowner. Just like hunting, you want to check with the landowner.
Do VAST and VASA sometimes share trails?
We do, but not in the wintertime. You're not allowed to ATV in the wintertime on VAST trails because they're not considered a snowmobile in statute. It has to have a track and a ski. You can't change your ATV into just tracks and go out onto our trail system unless it's a club. Some of our clubs have tracked ATVs they use for maintenance.
Okay, so if you want to switch gears,
Sure.
then.
So when I started at VAST, I would start to go to Trails and Greenways Council meetings here and there. We had another staff member that was assigned to this council. This council has been around for quite a while. But probably about 6 years ago, I started to really get invested myself in this council. And one of the reasons is, and I think this comes back from my Chamber of Commerce background, is wanting to uplift everyone. And I went to college for sociology, so I'm all about societies, even animal societies I'm interested in. And so it's really important to me that that VAST is so well established, and that it's important that we reach out and help these other trail organizations that could use our history, our leadership, some of our funding, whatever it is, to try to get them to a point where they could do what they need to do better. And maybe it won't cost them as much as it did for us learning these things. And so, we've gotten to the point now with this Trails and Greenways Council, and it's not just me doing this. I'm not trying to say that at all. This was why I got invested in this council. This council is made up of people just like me. These are leaders that are running these trail organizations that don't have the resources that VAST has. And we literally meet every week, and it takes up a lot of time. You can imagine, I was just yesterday testifying in House Transportation. Like we're all doing bits and pieces, and some of us have more resources than others. But when you're talking to the Trails and Greenways Council right now, you're talking to the executive directors of these trail organizations. And just VAST alone is responsible for $550 million a year of economic impact into this state. So you can imagine, and it costs almost $100,000 to do an economic impact study. So you can imagine the cost of trying to find that information for these other organizations that don't have the resources that we have. So this is really a pivotal time for us as we grow closer and work closer with Forest Parks and Recreation, and we get more people involved coming to Vermont and Vermonters recreating outside, that we need help. We need resources to help us, because there are some things that it's just time consuming for us to do, like do mailings, contact people, like all these things that at our level of position, we have people that work for us that do that, but we're now doing that for this organization. And what we don't want to see is people burn out, right? Because we are so valuable to this state as hosts of these trails. We look at ourselves as stewards of the land. Conservation is very important to us. Minimizing our footprint is very important to us. Where we can share trails is very important to us. So even though I say, Representative, you asked me about sharing trails, and I said we only have trails in the winter. Our trails, because the footprint is there in the summertime, we do cross over. So there are some other trail organizations that utilize the trails that we've built, or vice versa, to share. So we're not broadening that footprint. But all of these things are very, very important to us. So I just wanted you to know why, VAST was so involved in Trails and Greenways Council, and why it's so important to us, because we need to make sure that we continue to do what we're doing. We need to continue to improve our best management practices. We have all that at VAST. We've got BMPs. We work with the Agency of Natural Resources to develop these. We are on the phone with the stream alteration people all the time. And most of the people you're going to talk to today also have those experiences. And we just want to make sure that we're setting ourselves up and those that come behind us with a really good structure. And we're at the point now where we just need some help. We need some organizational help. I mean, we went out on a limb this year and took money out of our own organizations to hire Jill. So she's in the State House talking to you guys and educating you as far as the Trails and Greenways Council goes. So anyway, that's really all I have to say. These guys are also going to talk about, I think that they should talk about their own organizations too a little bit. And then we all have different sections that we wanted to talk about. But I'm happy I'll stay on and I can answer any more questions they have about VAST. But I just wanted you to know why VAST feels that the Trails and Greenways Council needs this help and is a very vital part of the recreation in Vermont.
Thank you, Cindy. Can you mention again how many employees VAST has?
We have 6 full-time employees.
Full-time year-round employees?
Yes. And none of our employees are out working on trails. Those are all volunteers.
Oh.
Representative Lipsky.
Yeah, it's so impressive what VAST has done. And when Representative O'Brien asked that question about shared trails, there's a VAST trail that goes abutting some of my property out in Morrisville, or Morristown. And we have horses and the neighbors let us ride when they're dry, but there are a lot of VAST trails that actually are in wetlands or wet meadows. And just like logging, you need to slowly freeze in your set of roads in order to be able to, to minimize any environmental impacts. Do the VAST groomers pack in snow early to try to freeze up? There's some long stretches, north parts in Stowe, and it goes north all up along those headwaters to, they feed into the Lamoille River. Who manages those decisions to create a firm, frozen base to support the snowmobile?
No, that's a great question. And I'm very familiar with all the area that you're talking about. I lived in Lamoille County until a year ago, and I moved there in 1978. So I know a lot, and I've ridden a lot through there. So yes, it's managed by our clubs. As I mentioned, we have 120 clubs, and each club has its own trail coordinator. And the trail coordinator's position is to go out and to say when the groomers are going out, what work needs to be done on that trail, if bridges need to be repaired or built. And then there is another step that each county has a trail coordinator, and we give out grants to help them build bridges and things like that, or trail maintenance. And part of that sign off is that the county trail coordinator also has to go out and sign off on any trail work that's done. So there's a lot of I's to dot, a lot of T's to cross. And that's also why we have the staff that we have, because we're managing all of those contracts. But they do fill in with snow. So they are moving snow, pulling it into the trail. Everything does need to be frozen, like you mentioned. So we're not disturbing wetlands and things like that. We do cross some wetlands, but we're very, very careful about making sure that the ground is frozen before we go out. Our groomers, that fleet of groomers, they're 8 feet wide and 20 feet long. Well, they're 12 feet long, but then they're pulling a drag behind them. So really they're about 20 feet long. So they're quite large, but they're also, because the tracks are so wide, the impact, the weight distribution is fairly light. So they're not digging up the ground and things like that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Cindy, thank you very much. And please stay on if you do have some more time this morning. And why don't we then welcome RJ Thompson to join us.
Hi, folks. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. Recovering, or I don't know if I'm recovering from a cold, but I've had it for over a week now. Classic end of winter finale, hopefully. I did send along some slides. I don't know if they are on your screen, but I sent them to Alora this morning.
Do we have them?
Yeah, they're posted, but you're also welcome to share your screen. You have access, so if you want to pull them up, you're more than welcome to.
Okay, you want me to do it that way? Sure.
And RJ, let me ask you also just to, for the record, introduce yourself and your affiliation and tell us where you are.
Certainly. Yeah, I was going to do that. So I am RJ Thompson. I'm the executive director of the Vermont Huts Association. We are a statewide nonprofit organization. We're actually based over in Stowe, but we have huts all across the state. And currently coming at you from my COVID quarantine shed that I built during the pandemic to find some sanity away from my kiddos. It was a bit grim there for a while, trying to get work done when your kids are running around. So yeah, let me go ahead and share my screen here. All right. Is everyone able to see that?
Yes.
Okay. Great. So, as I mentioned, we're a statewide nonprofit org. And, our mission is to foster a deeper appreciation of our natural environment and strengthen Vermont's communities by providing enriching and immersive outdoor experiences for all. So today I was hoping to chat a bit about kind of two of our major programs that we've been working on, discuss their impacts on Vermont and its residents. So right now, we are building the largest hut-supported trail network in the U.S., which sounds like, what? How's that happening? Because you probably haven't heard about it, but it's the Velomont Trail and Vermont Hut System. So like Cindy said, there are a number of nonprofit orgs across trail organizations across the state, and there's a high level of collaboration that occurs on any given day. And just a handful of those collaborators on this particular project, their logos are listed down there. So you've got Vermont Mountain Bike Association, Vermont Youth Conservation Corps, the Velomont Trail Collective, Trust for Public Land is a land trust, and then Quantified Ventures, which is a third-party consultant. But like Cindy said, a lot of the existing trails in the summer do overlap with many of the vast trail system. So what is this trail and hut network that we're seeking to create and actually are building as we speak here in Vermont? So it's going to be a roughly 485-mile trail and hut network spanning from Canada to Massachusetts that uses new and existing trails. So we're not gonna try and build 485 miles of brand new trail. There's a lot of co-location that can occur. We're really trying to utilize the existing infrastructure that's already here in the state. One of the key differences, though, between the Velomont Trail and the huts that will be along it, and some of the existing longer distance trails in Vermont, like the Long Trail and the Catamount Trail, is the fact that the Velomont Trail is intentionally routed into town centers. So the idea is to bring folks into these villages and communities and allow the users to spend time in those towns and then continue on their journey, whether it be on foot or on bike, up into one of the huts in the nearby forest, and then continue back down into the next village. One of the other exciting opportunities with this initiative is an opportunity to conserve up to 214,000 acres of unprotected land in a climate resilience corridor across the state. And we'll kind of show you a little map a little bit later, but that analysis was done by the Trust for Public Land. And so that's an opportunity. Like Cindy mentioned, there's a ton of private land here in Vermont, like roughly 3/4. And so when you think about the landscape impact, like that's quite significant if we're to succeed in pulling this off. The huts along the way the new huts will be ADA accessible. We'll show a couple photos of those just for some flavor a little later on, but that creates new opportunities for folks who might not otherwise be comfortable staying outside or in the backcountry. And as the trail comes into these downtown villages and centers, a lot of the rural communities may not have accommodation. And so we're also going to be building some hostels along the way so that when folks come off the trail, they've got an affordable place to stay. Right now, we're looking at opportunities along the Memorial Valley Rail Trail, Hardwick, St. Johnsbury, one down in Randolph along the Velomont Trail as well. So really, it's front country and back country infrastructure that we are working on. So again, just thinking about the impact for Vermont and Vermonters, there's a whole bunch of fun numbers up here, and I won't go through all of them, but just some fun stats to look at are, with the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps being a big part of this and a partner of ours, as they build these huts, we will bring 330 young adults through their workforce development program to build these huts. So that's a pretty significant number of Vermonters graduating, if you will, through that program with a trade, a skill that they can then bring into the next career in Vermont's workforce and find a really decent paying job, or perhaps create their own carpentry business. At large, this infrastructure would, when it's finished, result in about 112 new full-time jobs here in Vermont. And you can see some of the other economic impacts here on this slide. And then again, there's an opportunity to conserve up to 214,000 acres of unprotected land. And of course, the unspoken benefits of bringing trails into town centers, you're creating these new points of access for families, beginners, and experts. Here's a map of the corridor of opportunity, as we like to call it. And you can see it we call it the pink worm anytime we're looking at this, but it undulates north to south. And a lot of the reason why you see that is because we're trying to utilize the existing infrastructure across the state. And this analysis was done by the Trust for Public Land. They are a national land trust. They actually may have read recently, they just conserved, they conserved it a couple years ago, but the parcel just transferred to the U.S. Forest Service, the Rolston Rest parcel, 2,700 acres. It was the largest remaining inholding in Green Mountain National Forest. So they're a partner of ours who has helped to try and identify parcels across the state that would be suitable for this type of infrastructure. And similarly, when we have ideas about where this recreational asset could go, we reach out to them and say, oh, do you know this landowner? Would they be interested in conserving their parcels? So it's been a really good collaborative effort on both sides. I like to think pictures, are kind of more fun to look at than words on the screen. So here are a couple to give you an idea of what's happening. From clockwise from the top left, you've got the view looking over Chittenden Reservoir from a proposed hut site. We hope to build this next year, depending on how things shake out with the timing of permitting. The one on the top right is the interior of the Chittenden Brook Hut. That's our flagship hut. Again, we started not too long ago. VAST has a much longer track record than we do, but we started in 2016. We opened that hut winter of 2018. It's on federal land in Green Mountain National Forest, Chittenden Brook Recreation Area. So there's a family enjoying some breakfast there on a snowy morning. Bottom right is the VYCC crew actually building a privy, which is a composting outhouse for one of the huts. Center bottom is the Chittenden Brook Hut exterior during a snowy day. And bottom left is an outdoor program, after school program down in Rochester. That's held by the Ridgeline Outdoor Collective. And so you see there, just like that is what we are trying to do here, is get more kids, more families outside together. And, just looking at the excitement on those kids is like why I continue to come to work. So again, the project Velomont Trail and Vermont Hut Initiative is bigger than just building trails and huts. So I wanted to pause there. Happy to take questions on that before I jump into another program. And then similar to what Cindy did, is discuss how this ties into VTGC and why it's so important that we have this support moving forward.
Okay, let's see if there are questions about the Huts Association. Representative O'Brien.
RJ, what two counties, I can see one right off, but what two counties are not included in the trail?
What was the question?
There are 12 counties that the trail snakes through. What two are not included?
Randall
Pennington.
and Orleans.
No, it goes through Orleans. Yeah.
That's a great question. I have that in a different slide presentation. I could look it up for you. But the short answer actually is this is just the main artery of the trail and hut network. We're not stopping there. It's going to spiderweb out across, similar to how, and probably to greater extent, that the long trail has its spur trails. But because you're, with bikes, you can cover greater distances. The intent is to have this main artery, but then, spiderweb out across the state so that we can really serve more communities.
And that's true with Quebec and Massachusetts and New York. Are there connector trails already there where you reach the borders?
So in the Massachusetts border, there is a bike park not too far south of that, blanking on its name. And there's a similarly kind of operated chapter, mountain bike chapter, that we would kind of link into that. And that would be where it would terminate in Massachusetts, if you will, the southern terminus. But I'm blanking on that's name. Otherwise, it terminates in Reedsboro here in Vermont.
I can answer real quickly. It's Orange County and Grand Isle County. That's missing.
There you go, Josie. We're in it together.
Grand Isle's kind of a hard one to get over to, so I get that. We don't connect so much.
Any other questions?
I had one more.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
This may be for everybody in the room. I just wondered on the sort of Appalachian Long Trail, what users are allowed? Is there any part of that system that mountain bikes can go on, for example?
No, the AT Appalachian Trail and LT Long Trail, they are co-located south of Route 4, and they are exclusive for hikers, pedestrian use only. And quite frankly, you wouldn't want to ride a mountain bike or anything else on that terrain. It's quite technical. and it wouldn't be a sustainable way of implementing a multi-use bike trail, if you will. But I can see where your head's going, like, why not use that asset for this purpose? On the flip side, the Catamount Trail, particularly down in southern Vermont, and then some sections in central Vermont, this would be co-located with the Catamount Trail. And so that's a great opportunity for us to improve that trail tread for multi-use year-round activity. But also it improves that trail for winter use too, because like vast trails, there are some sections that are just wet and they take longer to freeze over. And so it can extend the season for skiers as well as we improve the tread for biking.
So Catamount is open to what kind of users?
Yeah, Catamount's one of our close partners, and we're actually currently working with them basically from Stratton south to the Mass border on doing some surface improvements this summer and next summer, actually.
Catamount Trail, is it primarily a ski trail?
It is, yeah. In the winter, it's cross-country skiing. Some of the trail is near backcountry skiing as well, yes. And they're also co-located in sections with vast trail segments as well.
Representative Pearl.
I'm not sure who should address this question. I was just curious if somebody could explain the rail bed trails, or who owns those, and how does that whole piece work? Because just a broad overview.
Are you able to address that, RJ?
I can. Cindy may be better at that because she spent so much time with LVRT until it was handed over to VTrans. Cindy, I don't know if you're still available. If not,
I was out of the room. What was the question about the LVRT?
Just curious how the whole structure works of who owns the rail trail and who manages that, and just kind of an overview of how that works.
Sure. So the LVRT is state property, so it's owned by the state of Vermont. It's rail banked, federally rail banked, which means that if at any time the feds wanted to turn it back into a railroad, they could. VAST until just recently was managing the project, the building project, and we've transferred it to the Agency of Transportation as finishing the project. We started construction in 2014. It's 93 miles long. What we now do, and we put about $3.5 million of snowmobile money into that trail of our own money. But what we do now is we only maintain it in the wintertime for all usages, and it's about $50,000 a year for us to groom it in the wintertime.
Just a follow up, are there other rail beds or that are potential, or that are being looked at, or that are currently used that are not functioning railroads anymore, or maybe in the future? Just
yes. So there's a connector in the St. Johnsbury area that there's a group, including the economic development folks in the northeast. There's some snowmobile people involved in that as well as other user groups. They are looking to connect that end of the rail trail in St. Johnsbury over to New Hampshire. The goal is that one day this trail will connect all the way down to Rhode Island. And right now it connects to the Missisquoi in Franklin County, which also goes into Quebec. So there's a lot of connection on both ends. One is already completed and the other one is in the planning process.
Thank you.
Representative Lipsky.
Yeah, there was another rail that the northern terminus was South Londonderry, Vermont, and Windham County, and it went down to Brattleboro. It was called 33 Miles of Trouble, washed out a lot. But there are still remnants of that rail trail. Is that part of any envision it's really a little to the east of the vertical corridor coming from like Bernardston or Clarksburg line.
Not at the for this project, not at the moment. But Cindy, if you want to chime in.
No, I was going to say, I'm not aware of that rail bed. Most of the rail beds in the state are owned by the Agency of Transportation, but there are some privately owned rail beds. And when I believe that when a rail bed becomes unused, it can revert back to the owners that are next to that abut that property. But I don't know of any plans for that particular rail bed.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, I was gonna say, just to clarify, the goal of the Velomont Trail corridor is to have roughly 70 to 75% of the trail be primarily single track, and when possible, built to adaptive friendly standards. So there's a difference between a rail trail and this particular infrastructure. This is more of a machine built multi-use mountain bike trail, so dirt surface.
RJ, if you want to, we'll let you get back to I think you
Sure.
jump back to the slide. So you get back on track.
Yeah, sounds great. I just wanted to talk again about, we talk a little bit about, impact and the infrastructure, but what are we doing for like Vermonters and underrepresented Vermonters? So we have a program called the Forest Program, fostering outdoor recreation, education, and sustainability and teamwork, kind of a mouthful, so it's easier to say forest. But what we do is we bring underrepresented youth from across the state into our huts completely free of charge. We provide the food, gear, the transport, and we have a naturalist that comes out with them. And really, you're bringing folks who might not otherwise have had access to this resource into the outdoors, into the huts in a safe way, to introduce them to everything that Vermont provides. So that's another program that we're growing along with the hut and trail network. So with every new hut that we build and new connectivity that is created, we can bring more of these folks into the outdoors. So again, here are just some photos of those children participating in a forest program at Chittenden Brook Hut, and then another one near Chittenden Brook Hut during winter and summer. I just have some other photos just so people can understand like what some of these huts look like, and then happy to answer other questions and speak more to VTGC. So again, this hut sleeps 4 guests. It's in Huntington, the Triple Creek cabin. Interior, quite primitive. This is a VYCC crew working on the Grout Pond Hut, which is down in Stratton, Vermont on federal land. They built it last summer and fall, and we opened it this past January. And here is the exterior photo of Grout Pond Hut. And this is the interior of Grout Pond. As you can see, it's super kid friendly. This is one of our first guests. 2 different families came together to spend a night out there. And there's my contact info. So yeah, that's what I've got for you guys. And as far as, how does this all tie into VTGC and funding for outdoor rec in general? I mean, Cindy said it really well. We're a lot of small nonprofits. We have 5.5 full-time employees on our end, and our funding mechanism is quite different than VAST. We currently rely on 2 federal grants that we won recently, but we all do so much, and we're all very overextended in trying to move forward kind of the bigger picture of outdoor rec in Vermont. And some of the legislation that we're looking at today is like quite exciting for us to see even being considered. So again, thanks for listening to us. Thanks for having us here, and happy to answer other questions.
I'll just make an observation. I think looking at the last few photos you showed, hut doesn't really fairly describe the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We all like to live there.
Yeah.
How do you get, what do you need to do to get permission to put up a structure like that on national forest land?
go through a process called NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. And that is kind of a holistic, it includes all of the different types of permits you might need on federal land. So a botanist goes out from the Forest Service, wetland specialists. They evaluate the site to look for sensitive environmental assets on the ground there, or factors that are on the ground. And it's, not that different than what you would do on private land. Of course, it's accessible. This is 16 by 24, and it has a steep gable roof. So there's actually just a knee wall on that second level. Our Chittenden Brook hut is 1 story. So, it's less than 600 square feet, actually. Perhaps that person there makes it look a little bigger than it actually is. The permit process on federal lands is definitely long, but it's got a clear process. And once you check all the boxes, generally move forward. We operate under what's called a special use permit with the U.S. Forest Service. And so we have 2 huts currently on federal land, one in the Rochester district, just outside the town of Rochester, and this one is down in the Manchester district, just outside of Stratton.
What's the occupancy rate over the course of a year?
Full. In the winter, oddly, not oddly, but in the winter, you can imagine supply and demand. There's a lot of people who play outside in the winter, but not a lot of places to stay outside in the winter. So our huts in the winter are booked just about every night, weeknights included. Occupancy rates in the summer are a bit lower, closer to like 75, 80% during summer months. But that's also, I think, going to increase as the connectivity becomes more and more as the Belmont Trail, and other nearby recreational trails are built out. So they're quite popular, and we've had great success. And the users of these huts are, they become stewards of the land and the surrounding area. They're affordable. Like this hut on a weekend is $175 for the entire hut, and it sleeps 10 people. So you split that out across 2-3 families, and it's an affordable way to enjoy the outdoors.
All right. Well, why don't we stop there? I don't see any other hands up. RJ, thank you for your testimony.
Stop sharing.
We have, I'm just going to take a brief time check here. We have another hour, and we've got a couple folks we haven't heard from who have been waiting patiently for an hour or so. Does the committee need to stand up and stretch? Some of you were.
You took care of that.
Some of you did your own self.
David, can I ask RJ one question? It may be relevant to your representation.
Yes, go ahead.
RJ, I used to go out to Grout Pond. You weren't born then. Snowmobile. Is that in the Battenkill watershed toward Sunderland, or does that drain toward Pikes Falls and the West River watershed? Because I think Grout Pond, you almost access from the Kelly Stand Road out of Arlington, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe in your district, Chairman.
It's not in my district, but I'll let RJ answer.
I would need to pull up the map for watershed, but it is accessed via Stratton Arlington Road, and then you actually come down Grout Pond Road, which is a Forest Service road. So it's located on the east side of Grout Pond, and for folks not familiar with that area, that's just north of the Somerset Reservoir. So if you travel south on the Catamount Trail about a mile, a little more than a mile, you'll hit the Somerset Reservoir.
Thank you.
I think it may drain into the Somerset Reservoir and then the Deerfield.
I'm pretty sure it does because it's on the east side of Kelly Stand. So I feel like there's
Deerfield, exactly. Yeah.
Great. Let's Representative Wilson.
I have to meet with somebody at 10 or 12.
Okay.
All right to leave them.
Sure. Yeah. Why don't let's just take 5 minutes so that we're not all fancy an hour.